Film fans of YouTube, hello and welcome back to the channel. I am Josh, your movie apprentice, and today I am looking at Back to Black, directed by Sam Taylor Johnson and starring Marisa, Abela, Eddie Marsan, and Jack O'Connell. This follows Marisa playing the role of the late Amy Winehouse as the film depicts her life from her starting out within her career to her death at the young age of 27. Before I get into my review, if you like what you're seeing on the channel, click the like button and subscribe for more video reviews that's coming all the time. Without further ado, let's jump right into this. So Amy Winehouse is someone that I actually do remember growing up during the peak of her rise. I remember her songs hitting the tracks. I remember having a Pop Party CD. I think it was Pop Party 3 or Pop Party 4 that had the Rehab song on there. I remember taking the newspaper from my dad, reading and seeing every now and again images of Amy Winehouse appearing in the newspaper, covering her turbulent life, her delving into questionable characters, her alcoholism, her bulimia, her anorexia, the Class A drug usage. So I was interested going into this one because unlike every other musician biopic that I have watched over the last few years, this is the first time I can say that I remember living during a time that they were alive and I was around when they died. So I was interested how they were going to approach this. Like, how are they going to deal with the turbulent life of Amy Winehouse versus the pure raw talent that she had? I'm not going to sit here and claim that I was the massive Amy Winehouse fan. I wasn't her biggest fan in the world. So how does the film deal with Amy Winehouse's story? In one word, I will say safe. This is probably the safest way a movie could depict her troubles and her life overall. And that both works as a positive, but mainly a detriment to the film's quality and story, because as Amy Winehouse says, she wanted to be remembered for her music and living through her music, like she sung songs based on her life. The film gives us a very saturated look at her rise and downfall. It does focus on some important bits. For example, her relationship with her nan and how greatly her nan's passing will affect her going forward. That was really well done, and they shared some good scenes together. However, they do raise the biggest ever death flag I have seen in the movie when it comes to their final conversation. Her relationship with her dad is played out quite strongly. I will say, however, that the film practically forgets about her mother, and it also ignores her friendship, possible companionship with Pete Doherty as well. There are a couple of key characters in her life that almost completely omitted from this. Her mom is literally mentioned one time, and then when we next see her mom is when she wins the Grammy, and they, for their part, they do replicate her winning the Grammy almost flawlessly to the actual winning of it in real life. But at the same time, I felt there was something missing from it. The film has the name get read out and then shows the family at the table's reaction, most of them that we have not even really met or got to know much, before cutting to Amy's reaction. Like, it would have been nice to see her try and replicate the actual reaction from her calm demeanor to just the absolute thunderstruck look on her face when she did receive that award. Obviously, most of the film focuses on her relationship with Blake. And I will say this, Marisa, Abela, and Jack O'Connell do have chemistry at times. Their initial first meeting in the pub is a great little sequence. It felt very natural, felt unequivocally British. Overall, despite her relationship with him and their initial breakup being a driving force behind her iconic Back to Black album, feels like we don't get to see a lot of the relationship. Stuff is mentioned, but we never actually see stuff in the flesh. For example, the fact that Amy would get too drunk and beat up on Blake. That happens one time in the film, and then we cut to their initial first time breakup. There's no real steady elevation from initial happiness to how toxic and codependent this relationship did become. For example, I did not know that Amy self-harmed. I did not know that was a thing they both did to try and one-up each other in their toxic relationship. And the film mentions it one time, and sure, I was surprised that I was learning something from the film, but at the same time, it wasn't really depicted. Like, we never see anything like that happen. It's just a casual mention. Like, granted, I don't want a 13 reasons why graphic depiction of this self-harm, but just a shot in their place with maybe a rusty looking razor blade that has a clear brown stain that can unmistakably associate with blood just in the background would have been enough to show a little bit more. Her alcoholism as well, which was a driving thing in a life that was heavily publicized and ridiculed by the paparazzi. She is casually drinking throughout the film, but it's rarely presented as a major problem. The way her alcoholism is presented is an interesting one, because there are a couple of scenes where it does try and hammer home how dangerous it is to her and the negative path it's going to take her down. But for the most part, it's very casual how it is depicted. And she goes from casually drinking to wanting to go to rehab in the blink of an eye. She starts off the film very against Class A drugs, and then later on in the movie, she's just doing them. There's no evolution that shows a particular moment where she chooses to delve into it. It's played less as a tragic turn of a character, because in a later scene, there is literally a gourmet dinner where they open a box and there's 2 cubes of what I believe is heroin or meth or something. I'm not drug familiar. The roughness of her life, a lot of the stuff that unfortunately she is remembered for a little bit, is glossed over. Now, yes, the film does make a point to say we weren't able to be remembered for her talent and her voice. And granted, Marisa does a great job portraying Amy Winehouse as a personality, and does a great job at least trying to replicate the talent when singing the songs. But because a lot of her music and the lyrics were driven by her real life experiences, it feels like this film is very saturated in a whole story. They show bits of her life and her downfall, which led to her death, but there's nothing graphically shown. Like, I don't want Danny Boyle train spotting style drug taking scenes, but it feels like we never get to really see how much this stuff controlled her life and how unhealthy she became. And the relationship with Blake, there are moments where they would have these fights, they would have these arguments, but we never see these fights and arguments. We just see the aftermath and some iconic, well, I say iconic, some very dark moments in her life that were heavily publicized. The only thing I think the film really gets right, outside of the replication of the Grammy stuff and how much her nan meant to her, is just how bad the paparazzi were back then, especially with her. Like, she can't leave her house without 7 or 8 guys with cameras in their face going, "You're right, Amy," gets a smile, like doing all that catcalling stuff. That is very well done. But for the most part, when it comes to showcasing her life, both musically and personally, it feels like it acknowledges stuff, it shows the bare minimum, but never really dives into it, and therefore the nitty gritty of her life and the true heart of it feels just glossed over. After this and One Love, it is safe to say that I don't think we're going to get a unquestionable biopic like Straight Outta Compton ever again. At least Rocketman did something different and was great as well. But outside of those two, over the last 10, 15 years, I can't think of a musician biopic that I've seen that's made me think that A, I've learned a lot more about this person, and B, just appreciate their life more. This is a Wikipedia biopic that excludes certain individuals. The fact that her mom is outright ignored for the majority of the film until she has to show up for the Grammy speech because that's what happened in real life, that is a great disservice to her story. Now, maybe some of you would disagree. Maybe some of you are diehard Amy Winehouse fans that are going to come at me and say this is the most accurate depiction they could have done for her. Yes, there is a fine line when it comes to showcasing her life versus exploiting her death and her tragedy, but it feels like Back to Black left a lot on the table that was left unexplored. Before I get into my grade, if you like what you're seeing on the channel, click the like button and subscribe for more video reviews like this coming all the time. But without further ado, let's grade this. Marisa Abela is amazing as Amy Winehouse. She does her absolute best to encapsulate her, and for the most part, I would say she succeeds. But unfortunately, like a lot of other musician biopics, just accurately depicting the person you're portraying isn't enough. There needs to be an interesting story around it. And Amy Winehouse's story, there's a lot there to work with, and the film only samples bits of it and never really commits to taking the full course. It passes, dives in ever so slightly, dips their toe in, but never really commits to it. Like I say, I don't want graphic 13 Reasons Why depictions of the self-harm or train spotting use of the hard drugs, but just more visual storytelling and more natural build of the course of the film would have gone a long way. The musical sequences are entertaining and they are very well choreographed and edited together, and her performance is really good in this. But for me, it just felt like there was something missing because we never really get to see the harshness of what drove her to make these iconic songs and that iconic album that won the Grammy. It feels like when it gets to perform the songs from these albums, they don't feel as impactful. Hell, she performs Rehab. We finally hear Rehab after she goes to rehab. She goes to rehab. It's just a casual conversation that feels like there's very little built towards it. And then she's in rehab. We have one scene of her in a garden at the rehab center. And then that's it. Where it ends, just left a lot up in the air and on the table. And overall, this was just too safe a movie. I'm going to have to say that for me, Back to Black is a lukewarm cup of tea. So Back to Black, have you seen it? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know your memories of Amy Winehouse. What is your favorite song? Do you remember what you were doing when you find out of her death? And how well does this film represent her? Let me know in the comments below. But until next time, everybody, my name is Josh. I have been your Movie Apprentice, and I'll see you all in the next video.